You're watching Africa Live. Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Penina Karibe in Nairobi. Let's have a look at what's more to come this half hour. Struggling with penetration, we tell you about Uganda's attempts to ensure its population. And change of guard, former assistant coach Aki Garbi returns to the Egyptian national team, this time as head coach. A student protester was killed on Thursday in clashes at Cairo University between supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi and security forces after police fired tear gas at demonstrators. The students were protesting against harsh new restrictions on the right to protest recently adopted by the military-backed interim government that ousted Morsi. CCTV's Maria Galang with this report.
Chaos in the streets of Alexandria. Egyptian police used tear gas to disperse a protest outside the city's main university on Thursday, where students were demonstrating against the severe prison sentences handed down to female protesters on Wednesday. An Alexandria court jailed 14 women for 11 years for obstructing traffic during a protest by supporters of ousted Islamist President Mohamed Morsi that took place last month. Meanwhile, in Cairo, more protests. This time in front of a Cairo court, with protesters calling for activists arrested in recent protests to be released. The 24 activists who were arrested after a protest in front of the Parliament building on Tuesday were ordered to be detained for 4 days pending investigations. One student was killed in the protests.
I've been running around in circles for the past 3 days. They were taken to the New Cairo district and then they were transferred to Tora prison. So I went there yesterday and was trying to find out if they were there until 10 p.m. This isn't right. How can Sisi say he'll cut the hands of anyone who lays a finger on Egypt's youth? And now the youth are being insulted and beaten and he's not doing anything.
They were also demonstrating against a new law passed by the government to curb protests.
Is freedom of expression that has been reserved by international decrees and human rights a crime? Is it a crime for me to defend my rights that the government wants to rob me of? We want answers from General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi.
Liberals and activists who backed the overthrow of former President Morsi are now becoming more vocal against the Egyptian military, which has pursued a tough security crackdown against Islamists, in which hundreds have been killed and more than 2,000 arrested, including Morsi. Maria Galang, CCTV.
To Mali now, where the parliamentary elections will go to a second round next month. According to provisional results, none of the parties secured an absolute majority in the first round. In the meantime, demonstrators gathered in the Malian capital, Bamako, to protest against France's policy in the northern town of Kidal amid suspicions of links between Paris and Tuareg separatists. Susan Mongeli tells us more.
Turnout in the November 24 polls was at 38.4%. While announcing provisional result, the country's Minister of Territorial Administration said the voter turnout was far below expectations. Some 6.5 million Malians were eligible to vote for a new National Assembly, with more than 1,000 candidates running for their 147 seats.
Well, actually, I was expecting this turnout because alliances were made. And natural alliances were a bit disappointing because you shouldn't leave your party to make alliances with any old person. I think that political parties should review this thing.
I expected it because people no longer trust these politicians, because once they reached the assembly, they disappointed everyone. The country has been destroyed. Nobody intervened. So the people are in trouble. They no longer trust their politicians. They are not fit for politics. So we are anxious regarding the behavior of our politicians.
The poll marked Mali's first step to recovery after it plunged into chaos following a military coup in March last year. The coup triggered the fall of the country's north into the hands of armed Islamist groups allied with Al-Qaeda. Meanwhile, hundreds of demonstrators gathered in the Malian capital Bamako on Thursday to protest against France's policy in the northern town of Kidal amid suspicions of links between Paris and the Tuareg separatists. The demonstrators also demanded the disarmament of armed groups.
À la France.
We are demonstrating to tell France to stop this complicity with MNLA because they're trying to sow the seeds of separation and we will not accept it. France was our friend. We want France to remain our friend. François Hollande came here. He promised the people of Mali that he was here to fight by our side for the territorial integrity of our country.
Kidal has been one of the most insecure parts of Mali's northern region, which has been taken by rebels including Islamist extremists allied with Al-Qaeda following a March 2012 military coup. France launched a military intervention in January to drive out the rebels. Meanwhile, the first Chinese soldiers have arrived in Mali to join the United Nations peacekeeping mission. The full Chinese contingent is expected to arrive in Mali next month. It is the first time the Chinese military is dispatching security forces for a peacekeeping mission.
The arrival, and I was very happy of the first 17 advanced mission that goes to Gao, which is to the north of Bamako. And in the beginning of December, we will see almost 400 Chinese troops coming here. Chinese who deal with engineering, with genie, but also with force protection, and also the medical support. These are three crucial ingredients for our mission, and I think the solidarity that the Chinese people and Chinese government are showing to Mali is very welcome, and it's in terms of size and political significance, I think, unique.
France handed over responsibility for security to the United Nations peacekeeping force in July. However, the UN force currently has less than half of its mandated strength of more than 12,000 military personnel and has appealed for reinforcement. Susan Mungeli, CCTV.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a break. Coming up, the battle to save rhinos from poachers in South Africa.
Is Africa's peace architecture changing after the UN intervention brigade's victory over the M23 rebels in the eastern DRC? We examine the question this week in Talk Africa.
Businesses in South Africa are throwing their weight behind the fight to save the rhinos in the country. And with the Kruger National Park being the focus of attention because of the number of rhinos there, the park management is also taking the lead in its approach to dealing with this scourge. On Thursday, the park took ownership of a refurbished Gazelle military helicopter.
At the moment, there are 200 incursions into the Kruger by poachers every month. Fortunately, they aren't all successful. And it seems that the cooperation between the South African national parks and the private sector is starting to pay off, with the rate of killing year on year coming down.
The environment is conducive to investment in South Africa. Business is a corporate citizen, and therefore they are obliged. They are enjoined by the Constitution to be part of the initiative to protect the environment. That's Section 24 of our Constitution.
Part of the war effort has moved into other areas of support, the battle for the hearts and minds of the younger generation.
I think the important thing is a lot of business people go to the park, to the bush. It's a tourist attraction. It brings in huge amount of funds, and it's still at its infancy. Countries like Spain receive more income from tourism than South Africa makes from gold. So there's a huge opportunity, and it's the heritage for our future children and their children, which we need to protect.
Cash donations are considered critical in the fight, as sandparks can allocate the capital where it's most needed, but some groups are taking a different approach.
It is absolutely critical. Sandparks, the South African government, the army can't do this on their own. This war is a properly intense war, and it's not just a tactical war on the ground. It's a media war, it's a perception war, and every single African business should be involved in it. There's no question. Government cannot do this on its own.
There is a concern, however, that some parts of the private sector might be jumping on the bandwagon for their own benefit.
With South African national parks, I think our appeal is that they should come direct to some parks. We have seen quite a lot of NGOs cropping up, and they selling paraphernalia to do with anti-rhino poaching, but we don't know where the money ends up.
The private sector has an important and essential role to play in the fight against rhino poaching, and they have to be careful though how they invest their money with this fight that's going on at the moment. I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV in the middle of the Kruger National Park.
A fire outbreak in a garage in Mogadishu's K4 Street has injured 5 people and caused an unknown amount of damage and loss. Over 100 vehicles and hundreds of cartons of car lubricants were at the garage at the time of the fire. A huge smoke hung over the city for hours as AMISOM soldiers and the Banadir municipality firefighters battled to put out the inferno. The fire that paralyzed businesses along the Kilometer 4 junction has been linked to the fuel trade in the areas as a possible cause. Central African Republic needs up to 4 times more peacekeepers than those currently deployed to quell the worsening sectarian conflict. The European Union's top humanitarian official said there was need to deploy more peacekeepers to also provide security for aid workers in the country. Fears are growing over the living conditions of tens of thousands of people displaced by sectarian violence. The Central African Republic has descended into chaos since the Seleka coalition of rebels, many of them from neighboring Chad and Sudan, ousted President Francois Bozize in March. Niger's capital, Niamey, played host to the 9th edition of the International Festival of African Fashion. This year's event ran under the theme Creativity in the Service of Peace and brought together designers, stylists, models and other fashion professionals. Both local and foreign tourists attended the event despite security concerns. The former French colony has experienced political instability and a series of coups since gaining independence in 1960. Organizers hope to change the negative image of the country through fashion. Let's go back to Somalia, where motorists there have had to make do with roadside petrol vendors who literally hawked fuel in plastic cans for the last 22 years. Somalia's capital has not had a gas station for refill or for basic motor vehicle servicing for the entire period. But as CCTV's Mohammed Jirmogi now reports, efforts to rebuild the city are including this once obsolete basic services.
For the first time in 22 years, motorists enjoy the convenience of gas station service. Drivers in Mogadishu can now fuel up at a filling station, complete with pumps dispensing high-quality fuel. It's easy and convenient. Just fill tank and pay. This has changed the rather risky but traditional handling of fuel in Mogadishu, where motorists relied on roadside vendors selling dirty fuel in jerrycans.
For me, there's no much difference in costs, but what makes me happy is the shift from dirty jerrycan fuel to an organized filling station.
Motorists say fuel at the gas station is cheaper, more organized and cleaner.
The fuel is filtered and clean, which is a big difference for us. Besides, it's even a modern style of fuel service.
This is way easier than roadside petrol in jerrycans. You see, here there's a dispenser that pumps fuel without having to refill the jerrycan first. This is convenient.
Fuel dispensers pump petrol and diesel into vehicles and calibrate the number of liters and cost of fuel transferred to the vehicle. And this is a new thing in Mogadishu. The filling station offers car wash service as well as sells lubricants for motor vehicles. A booming business venture, more gas stations are opening up in the city. For 22 years, this city didn't have basic services such as gas stations. Poor and refined petrol often caused problems for most motorists. And now as the city attracts investments and restores services, motorists too have access to easy, clean fuel. Mohammed Jirmogi, CCTV, Mogadishu.